All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning. Today is Tuesday, September 14th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the webinar on positive behavior supports. Today's presenters are Rachel Freeman, Jeffery Pearsall, and Lauren Neubauer. We also have with us today Dr. Meg DePasquale. She is the Clinical Director for DDA. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode for now, and everyone there are two handouts in the handout section, and you can hopefully you can download those, but if you can't, I can email them to you. And also there in the audio section, there's two options to listen to the webinar. That's by phone and by computer. And if you click on phone call, the number appears, and then you can go ahead and call in. We are recording the webinar, and we will post the link on the DDA website, and it's also on YouTube. So if you have questions, we will get to those periodically. It's in the question section or chat. I'm not sure how people get to that. So that's it. That's it for the little housekeeping on our technology. So now I'm introducing Dr. Meg DePasquale, she's Clinical Director for DDA. Good morning, Meg.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We want to just thank you all for joining us this morning to listen in to Positive Behavior Supports, what it's about and how you can get involved. Some of you may know that we started doing this pilot a few years ago, and so we are now wanting to look into our second cohort. And so today we're going to give you guys a little bit of information about positive behavior supports and how your agencies can be involved. Today we have Jeffery Pearsall and Rachel Freeman, as well as Lauren Neubauer, to discuss this topic. Jennifer is with Shepherd Pratt and Mid-Atlantic APBS, and Dr. Freeman is with University of Minnesota. So they have been working with DDA for the past few years to get this up and running, and we've appreciated all their assistance and help in this area. So without further ado, I'm going to let Jennifer go ahead and get started. Welcome, Jennifer.
Perfect. Thank you, Meg, and welcome everyone. Excited to have so many folks joining us today to learn a little bit more about positive behavior support, specifically here in Maryland. As you are joining the room, it would be wonderful if you could, in the chat, just type in your name, the name of your organization, and the role that you have within that organization. That'll give us a wonderful bird's eye view of who is here today, a little bit of detail on your organizations that you represent and the role that you play. And we'll have an interactive activity in a second to see kind of where we all fall across the state as we're joined together today virtually. Today, this morning, in the time that we have together, we're going to do some introductions. We're going to talk about positive behavior support, provide an overview, get some stories from the field within here in Maryland, and also some stories from Minnesota, and then talk to you about how to get involved and leave some time for questions and answers. So feel free to post questions and the like, and so that we can have those to answer at the end of the session, towards the end of the session, and then as well we can follow up with those and provide any kind of written feedback and send that out to you all after the fact. All right. Meg indicated that we are representing a variety of different organizations here, and just wanted to give a context for the work around positive behavior support with the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration, that this is a partnership that the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration has engaged with some other organizations to help support their statewide efforts for positive behavior support. So today we have with us Rachel Freeman from the University of Minnesota, the Institute of Community Integration, myself, Jeffery Pearsall from Shepherd Pratt and the APBS Mid-Atlantic Network, And we also have some folks from the Eastern Shore, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, who work together to really think about what the PBS looks like across the state for organizations and how to best support these efforts now and in the future. At this point, I'd like to have us get to know each other a bit more and figure out who we have here today and what you hope to get from this session. So I'm going to transition over to an activity for us to engage in, but as a reminder, if you could just type in your name, the name of your organization, and the role that you have within your organization into chat, that would be great. All right, I am going to share my screen differently and get you into an activity where we can see where we are today. Okay, so I'm hoping that you can see this screen here, and what you can do is you can either use that URL and or you could go into here we go. All right, you could use that URL or you can go into that web link, and I'll post that into chat now to participate in this in these questions. So I'll give you a second to find that and to pull that up, and then I'll activate these. All right. So what I'd like to do is get an idea for who is here today, and we're just going to map it out, if you will. And so when you go to this link, you should be able to put a little tab or a marker on the area within the state that you represent, where your agency is located or provides services. And so this will give us a nice little balcony view of where folks are joining us from. All right, thanks. Perfect. Lots of representation from across the state. This is wonderful. And this will fill up fast, right? Excellent. Perfect. We have folks from really across the board here, from out towards Western Maryland all the way down to Southeast Maryland and the far Eastern Shore. Perfect. And Northeast. Excellent. Perfect. Thanks. And so as you're, you can continue to do that, and we can see where folks are. I think we have a lot of folks responding to that. Excellent. Perfect. And I'm seeing the numbers on my side. We have about 101 folks who have indicated where they're from. That's great. I'm gonna, as you're doing this, I'm gonna move on to the next question. All right. And hopefully you are represented on here in your broader geographical location of where your organization is located and where you provide support to people. The next question I want you to think about for a moment here, and just enter, what do you hope to learn or get from this session? What brought you here today? What would you like to learn, and that can help us with today's content, but also in the future as well. So feel free to, excellent, how big an impact PBS is having. You want to learn more about positive behavior support, tool strategies to better support participants. Yep. Information about the pilot, practical ideas. All right, new tools. Excellent, consistency. Things move around quickly. You guys really are giving us some great input here on what you hope to learn. How to implement in the agency, practical ideas for implementing in home, consistency in training staff. Yep. How to train staff. How, I think I saw one in here about how organizations can get involved with second cohort. Better understanding of positive behavior support as it relates to DDA clients. Excellent, thank you. All right, and keep entering those ideas in here, and we'll use this information for today. That gives us a bit of a balcony view of what you're interested in, and I think we're touching on many of these topics, and some maybe not quite as in detail, but we definitely have some resources that you can turn to for some of these, like tools and strategies and way to support staff, etc. And we'll definitely be talking about how to get involved with the cohort too, as you move forward, or as we move forward within the state. Okay. So feel free, I think that you can continue to type into this as I move back to the slides. And so feel free to keep adding into this as we move into some content. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So let's get into a brief overview about positive behavior support, and then we'll talk about the stories from the field, so you can hear from folks who have implemented and have experience implementing, talk to you about how to get involved, and then moving forward with any questions that you have. And so when we talk about positive behavior support, it's good to kind of land on a general understanding or common understanding of what we mean when we talk about positive behavior support, you know, and as the DDA is bringing on this approach and supporting organizations to really understand what we're talking about here. And it's thinking about positive behavior support as an approach that really promotes the respectful delivery of practices and supports, and supports the dignity of individuals. We're talking about a progression of assessments and interventions, and we'll illustrate what that looks like in the progression, if you will. Thinking about utilizing a validated strategies when working with individuals and people, and also with working with our staff who support people in the agencies and organizations that you work with. When we think about positive behavior support too, and a lot of the work that that we do, especially with organizations initially coming on, is we talk about positive behavior support being applied throughout the system, and thinking about that as occurring across a continuum of supports. And so, and again, we'll illustrate that PBS can be applied within a multi-tiered framework at the level of the individual, but also at more of the larger system when we think about programs, work environments, homes, etc. And the real context that we're creating here is a positive and consistent environment that's really predictable and focuses on equitable outcomes, where we're focused on enhancing quality of life and preventing problem behavior. So that gets us grounded into a kind of a common understanding. And oftentimes when we think about positive behavior support in organizations, our heads go automatically to some of the tier 3 individualized planning that is often highly associated with the terms positive behavior support. And that is true. And positive behavior support has a strong history with supporting the approaches and how we develop. We go through the assessment process and intervention process and planning process with individuals with more complex needs. But we're going to be talking today also about the foundation, right? We're going to provide an overview of organization-wide positive behavior support, which really does reflect the systems and continuum of support language that I shared in the previous slide. And we're going to focus in on tier 1 initially with cohorts, and then expand into this tier 2 and tier 3, or the all summer few. And we're going to focus on the foundation. And this logic, this tiered logic, was really borrowed from the public health field. And thinking about, you can think about some of our kind of medical equivalents to this when you think about a continuum of support. What do we do for all? what do we do for some people and what do we do for few? So if you put like a public health and framework on this, dental hygiene could be one of those examples. Where what do we do for all people? Well, we suggest that all people have a cleaning every 6 months, and that you brush your teeth at least twice a day and you floss. And that's what information we get out for all people, the foundation that we try to get all folks to engage in the medical field. But we know that even if some people have that, if they go for their checkups twice a year, they brush frequently and they floss, that some people will still progress with some kind of dental hygiene need. May it be, think about like a cavity, and you have a cavity filled. But even with those supports in place, if you have you're going for your cleanings twice a year, you're brushing your teeth regularly and flossing, you might get a cavity here and there. Few people, if you have those foundations in place, a few people will continue to develop greater needs with their oral hygiene. So maybe it's gum disease or oral cancer or the like that would require more complex interventions. And what we're going to be focusing on initially with cohorts, what we focus we focus on the continuum, but we really focus that first year on this foundation for what do we do with all. Because we know that if we build that foundation and make that very strong, then we can decrease the number of people that need more intensive supports at tier 2 or tier 3. Right. So when I talk about tier 1, we want to think about what does this look like. And so there are some common core features with tier 1 positive behavior support. And I'm going to go through these quickly because I think some of our the folks from the field will share some additional examples in this. But when we think about the foundation, okay, thinking about like our oral hygiene and going to the dentist twice a year and brushing and flossing, etc., there are some predictable features of tier 1, and that is developing a predictable and proactive settings through identifying some common language and routines. And what this would look like is looking at a matrix, if you will, or looking at this is a common language, common values that roommates in a home would put together, and identifying what are their routines throughout the day, and how did they come to an agreement on what does it look like to be respectful and to communicate and to show caring during meal preparation or during meetings or returning home or during kind of the morning routine. And so roommates within a home would come together and come to a common agreement on what this language would look like within their home, and really setting the tone and the climate for that home. Again, creating some predictability so we're all on the same page. And then once that language is developed, there are plans for teaching, prompting, and communicating those social behaviors that are identified. And so this is another example. This is from Minnesota, where the dinner routine was agreed upon, and things like respecting people's different abilities, getting involved for having a positive attitude, and then like working together, offering to help each other with bigger tasks. And so that's a common language that's identified. And then we go the next step by saying, how do we teach this? How do we move forward with this so that we are understanding and able to support that working together? And so there are approaches to structuring that teaching and support. And this is one example where you have a from those common values of working together and being able to have some kind of resource for your direct support professionals to be able to help the people in the home with some of these core values or common values that they identified by going through activities, right? And so this would be an activity example where you define working together, observing actions, offering to help, doing something with somebody, and then identifying what does that look like and what does that not look like through non-examples and examples, and really engaging in practice so that when that routine comes up, there's been an opportunity to practice and we're all getting on the same page. Other aspects of Tier 1 include acknowledging and recognizing positive social behaviors. And we really can think about this through positive social interactions and praise, and not just for the people that we support, but also for our staff. And what we do know is that when we have those positive social interactions, when we engage in praising each other and catching the things that we appreciate and value, that we promote relationships. And there is a strong component of relationship building throughout this, especially at that Tier 1 and building that foundation. We're, improvements like this, and including and focusing on positive social interactions, can also help improve climate and impact satisfaction and quality of life. There's often a saying, whatever you feed will grow, and it's really whatever you pay attention to is what you're likely going to see more of. And so what we can think about doing is thinking about how do we acknowledge and catch those valued behaviors, those things that we really appreciate. And we can think about that in our professional life, but you can also step back and think about that in your personal life and think about relationships and interactions, whether they're friendships or with your children or spouses or partners. What relationships have really felt good, and oftentimes they drill down, and when you drill down, you realize that those are the relationships where you felt valued, where you felt like you had those positive social interactions on a more frequent basis. And it's bringing those components and making sure we're focusing in on those in the work environment as well, and not just with the people that we support, but with each other as staff and support staff. And then we talk about having procedures in place to proactively and using a function-based approach, responding to challenging situations, because challenging situations will occur. And when we think about responding, we want to be thinking about ways that we can respond that take into consideration the why, thinking about why are people engaging in that behavior. So that we can think about that function, if you will, before we respond. We also know that increasing our empathy can help shape our responding. And when we do respond, we want to respond in respectful ways that are person-centered and supportive and focused on safety. And I am going to play this short video here for you, and about empathy and how it's related to how we respond to folks.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, I played that section for you. The link is within the slides, and don't mean to play it again. The link is within the slides, and I'm going to try to put that link into the chat now. All right. And so that just gives you a little example of empathy and one of the elements of responding to behavior, and some of what we talk about when we start thinking about really that foundation of Tier 1 positive behavior support and what we do with all. And then some final elements of Tier 1 positive behavior support include consensus building with teams. So there's a strong teaming component, and I'll touch on that, as well as the emphasis on using data for making decisions and looking at data and then in a whole and trends in data. Okay. What does it look like at Tier 2 and Tier 3? Like I had mentioned, within the approach here in Maryland with the Developmental Disabilities Administration, when we start with cohorts, we focus in on Tier 1 and building that foundation, but then evolve and move into thinking of Tier 2 and Tier 3 and what it looks like to be, what the positive behavior support framework looks like at Tier 2 and Tier 3. So at Tier 2, these are strategies and interventions for some individuals that need extra support. We use data to make those identifications, and through data monitoring, the aim is to engage with early intervention. So catch the needs early and provide additional supports around some of those key skills and social skills that are identified in your with the common values, but also additional skills as well. These tend to be more simple interventions, not the highly complex interventions, and can also include elements of mental health and wellness. At Tier 3, these are real individualized positive behavior support plans. And like I had mentioned earlier, this might be where your head goes automatically when you hear the term positive behavior support, where we're engaged in detailed and complex assessment and planning supports that are integrated with other strategies, so trauma-informed care, DBT, et cetera. And the plans are monitored through the use of data collection and review, and the team reviews the process for each person, so more of a comprehensive team. Right? Some other elements of positive behavior support, when we think about big ideas of positive behavior support, we want to be thinking about positive behavior support and a way of work. And so often what we bring in are these elements of decision-making, and that we are always guided by our outcomes. Our data that we collect will identify what we want to move towards, the outcomes we want to achieve. And when we know what our outcomes, what we want to achieve, we identify those validated practices to help us support all of the people that we support. So we put practices in place. We use data to, well, we're putting those practices in place, or the fidelity. And we really need to focus in on systems, and systems meaning that what do we do to put in place to support our staff? And we put a lot of emphasis on that at Tier 1 and across all tiers. But we really, when we come in and start talking about Tier 1 positive behavior support, we spend a lot of time with teams talking about what are the systems that you can put in place to make this stick for a long time. Because if you're going to invest in this work, you want to make sure that you're investing in this for the long term, that what efforts you put into place now are going to last across years. And so we talk about things that we know are effective in helping support direct support professionals, program directors. It could be organization administrators in implementing the strategies, those validated practices really well. So we talk a lot about teaming and training. How do you structure coaching and performance feedback after you provide training to direct support professionals? And then how do you evaluate your fidelity and outcomes? So we spend a lot of time on the organizational components of the PBS approach. I also, what I'm hoping that you're getting out of that, or we all hope that you're getting out of this, is that there are some terms and some ways that we're talking that align with other priorities within your organization. And you know, when we move in with positive behavior support, when we think about positive behavior support strategies and practices, we're really thinking about, especially at that Tier 1, how do we create these environments that are really predictable and positive for folks, that are consistent for not just the people that we support, but also our staff, and that we're creating equitable environments. We're also thinking about the aspect of safety from making sure that we're balancing that important to an important for element. And we're really thinking about where are those aspects of alignment. All of these terms that we're talking about here are illustrated in other priorities that you have currently within your organization. And so another big idea that we talk about with our cohorts is where are those avenues of alignment, and where can you make those connections that are aiming you towards the same outcome. A lot of this is based on starting with leadership and making sure that there's a strong role of leadership within the organization to think about priorities for this work. How does this fit within your organizational strategic plan? How does this fit within your organization goals? And how can this approach, positive behavior support approach, help you achieve those outcomes? So we talk about the role of leadership, and the role of leadership in organizing some of those variables that I talked about that are really critical to long-term success. How do you think about long-term action planning around how you provide training to all staff? And how do you provide coaching and ongoing performance feedback so that when you do have new staff come on board, that they're supported in implementing the strategies that you value when working with and supporting people, as well as the evaluation and performance feedback. Right. When we think about leadership, one thing to think about as you are considering this work is that organizational leadership should include folks that within your organization that are leaders and decision makers at the organization level. But also when we talk about leadership that would guide this process, it's thinking about who within your organization, what are the range of folks within your organization and roles that people have, and that leadership team that comes together to talk about positive behavior support for the organization, are there a range of people and voice on that team where everybody within the organization feels like there's somebody that, it might not be them, but there's somebody that they feel represents their role within the organization. And when we talk about teaming, it's a strong component of anything that you bring into your organization. we're not talking about adding additional teams. We're not talking about making up something new, but how do you anchor this to an existing structure, right? The big idea here is to work smarter, not harder, and make sure that you're looking at what you already have, whether you're a large organization or a small organization. How does this fit? How can we contextualize this so we have some leadership working together to guide this ship, if you will, for positive behavior support? The other thing to think about too is when we talk about positive behavior support, the big idea with positive behavior support is those plans, whether it's at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, require those who are supporting adults and children to change their own behavior. And so a lot of the work within positive behavior support is around how do we organize those systems, right? To make sure that we are able to engage in professional learning and ongoing training with staff and supporting their strategies and how they on a day-to-day basis. And again, this is an area where you contextualize. You think about, there's not a one way to do this. You think about the resources you have, the needs that you have, and how can you think about how you organize the support for your staff, as well as the support for the people that you're working with, right? Oh, pardon me. A little bit of history of positive behavior support before I move on to some stories from the field. We put this in here to kind of illustrate the big picture of positive behavior support across the state. And so some of you and many of you have likely heard of positive behavioral interventions and support, or school-wide PBIS. The Maryland State Department of Education has a over 20-year history of implementing and supporting the implementation of positive behavior support, or PBIS, within schools across the state. And that is through a partnership with the State Department of Education, Johns Hopkins University, and Sheppard Pratt. All school systems have implementation of positive behavior support within their school system. It's not every school, but it is approximately 73% of schools in the state. And that includes the Archdiocese of Baltimore and Manseth schools. So there's been a strong history of positive behavior support within Maryland. I will say on the school end, this work in Maryland, they were one of the first states to really adopt a statewide model for positive behavior support in schools. The Maryland Department of Juvenile Services has also worked on implementation of positive behavior support within a range of their programs, and they have an over 5-year history of this work, and have also thought about what statewide implementation would look like and how to support programs across the state. And then Maryland DDA has been talking about positive behavior support and their statewide infrastructure for implementation. And the first cohort was brought in 2019. And this is led by the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration, and partnering with others like the University of Minnesota, Sheppard Pratt, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. There's a strong history here, and I'm pointing out the cohort 1 organizations to kind of see where they are across the map, how that leads to where you are within your regions and across the state, and give you an overview of the future planning for Maryland. And the state, the Maryland DDA, has identified a priority for providing support across the state, and doing so through a cascade of supports. And essentially where this is, the DDA implementation, state implementation teams determines how do they provide training, coaching, and evaluation support to the regional teams across the state, and how do they support, the state support the regional teams infrastructure to provide coaching, training, and evaluation. And the state's currently building out the positive behavior support, training, coaching, and evaluation support that then can be provided to organizations. And so it's linking, there will be support over time from your regional teams through DDA to support implementation at the organization level. And at the organization level, you have to think about how do you provide that support to the programs within your organization. And I want smaller organizations to realize, again, this is contextualized. This isn't a one size fits all. You could be one and the same here if you're a small organization. You could be the program and the organization implementation team at the same time. So it's really working with what you have and making sure that this all fits together. So with that, I want to turn it over to some stories from the field, all right? And I'm gonna first introduce you to Lauren Neubauer from the ARC of Northern Chesapeake. So Lauren, you can tell me when to advance slides. That would be great.
Hey everybody. Yeah, I'm happy to be here today and share kind of our journey. Go ahead, Jen. Okay, so we were part of the first cohort, and I believe we had approximately 10 employees join day 1 and day 2 of the first cohort, where we then decided to form our committee, develop what our mission statement would be, develop up which pilot sites we wanted to work on, and then work on training and implementing what PBS would look like here for, again, our agency, but then also each department within the agency and so on. Go ahead, Jen. So I know Jen had talked about, working smarter, not harder. We did end up having to do our own committee. There actually wasn't a committee with a wide enough range that already existed. And we knew from those 10 people who attended day 1 and day 2 that they all wanted to be part of it. And it was very intentional when we signed our staff up for day 1 and day 2, that it was a wide variety. There were, if there was, I believe, 10 people, there was 8 departments. So people from each department, and that is the makeup of our committee still. So we try to have at least one member from every department. So this varies, and it has varied over the past, I guess, 2.5 years. But we do try to incorporate everybody, including, say, IT or logistics departments, transportation, and then obviously our programs and people from our programs on different levels. So again, thinking of maybe our community living program and being able to have the assistant director, a frontline supervisor, and a DSP. When we first started, we didn't know necessarily what our expectations were. So again, as a committee, we came up with what we wanted our expectations to look like. And then we have reviewed these annually. Jen, are you able to pull up the other document? So Jen's helping me pull up what our expectations are for this year, just to give you guys an example of what it looks like to be part of our committee. But we do allow staff to rotate and obviously step down if they're not feeling like they can commit to being part of that.
Yeah, I'll also indicate it's in the handout there as well. So I'm trying to pull it up now. It's going a little bit slow, but I'll pull that up. And
okay. And what we do, so I can elaborate. So each, I call our committee ambassadors. So each ambassador agrees to take the information from our committee back to their department. They will lead team building activities, share the resources, and get feedback for our committee. Eventually, these ambassadors will be the people who are leading their departments when it's time to make a behavioral matrix. And again, this is, okay, so Jen has it pulled up now. So each month it has what to expect. We also developed an annual goal last year. Our mission statement is listed in there as well. I know we're going to get to that on the next slide, but then what to expect. And to be honest, I was very clear, again, as the leader of our committee, that there are no hard feelings if somebody cannot commit to what we're asking for, because it's not a passive committee. And I know that I believe Leslie and I think Neil are on this meeting as well, who are part of our committee. And because we have dedicated staff who have agreed to these expectations, it's fun. It's the, you know, I've had people say this is the best meeting that they have all month. We do meet monthly. It's about an hour, between an hour and a half. We typically have an agenda. It's sent out in advance. We have volunteer positions, which is also part of this document. So you can see that there is somebody assigned to taking minutes. We also now, because we use Microsoft Teams, we record for people who can't attend. We have a timekeeper to help us stay on task. We have a data analyst who might be bringing that data that we want to examine from pilot sites. And then the welcome committee are staff who have agreed to do the team building activity or icebreakers. And then the facilitator, who is me, I'm the one that's creating and running the meeting. But it's really hard, especially, and I'm sure some of you have figured this out over the past pandemic, but it's really hard to lead a meeting and then do all those other things and make it, again, a fun and engaging experience. So that is kind of how our team works at this point. We have had staff turnover. We've had people leave the committee. We've had people leave the agency, and they've only, you know, stopped the committee because they left the agency. But then we've also had people who are still working here, and they've just passed the torch to other people in their department. And again, that's perfectly fine, because at the end of the day, we want to have as many people involved as possible. Okay, Jen, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I talked about creating our mission statement, and this did take several months because we had to get our committee formed and then get feedback. So those people who did join the committee that did not attend the day 1 and day 2 training from the DDA training did take additional time to get caught up to speed, and that's to be expected. But once we were able to do that, we did decide that we wanted to increase positive interactions between everyone in our organization, which in turn improves our quality of life. And this also came with some expectations that we wanted to increase staff retention, increase IP goals, increase staff satisfaction, increase the amount of staff we have going through NADSP certification. And then we wanted to decrease the number of incident reports and decrease site referrals at those tier 2 and tier 3 levels. Go ahead, Jen. Okay, so we didn't necessarily draw straws to see who was going to lead the committee. But my supervisor, Kim Albert, is a clinical director. She's also a licensed social worker, and she's also a senior director here. And so that encompasses multiple departments. So because we knew there was going to be ongoing time and effort, it was proposed to me. And as a BCBA, a behavior analyst, I had experience in PBS. I used to work in public and non-public schools. And so since I had the background from the school level, it was offered to me, and I was very happy to accept. So again, even though it is a committee, it is steered, and I spend roughly 6 hours a month between meeting preparation, sharing resources, doing research, and that does not include any special projects, which we do have a couple special projects. So it is going to take somebody's, you know, some effort, and at least to set up. So again, we're in almost year 3, I believe. So I'm curious to see how that changes over time. Go ahead, Jen. Okay, so I did include 2 matrices that were created. So when we decided our pilot site, we picked based on the frequency of those who needed tier 2 and tier 3 support. So there is not a matrix for the community living house that we used, but they were, they had 2 people at tier 3 supports with full-on support plans, as well as high turnover and high rates of staff dissatisfaction. This one specifically was for our summer camp, which was chosen due to the fact that it was a child population. We knew that the kids and the campers were used to having positive behavior supports in their schools, and the camp counselors, because the majority of them were between high school and college age, also had experience. So Jen, you can go to the next slide. And another pilot site we used was our employment discovery program. And again, they were housed on site here at the office. And so there was a lot of tier 2 support being given based on location. So my office is here, and so would have an issue, they would come down to my office, or I would be called up for a crisis intervention. So we wanted to use them as a site. And I don't know if you noticed, but at the top of this, they had chosen their values, which are accepted, respect, and communicate. As a whole, when we rolled this out, and I'll get to it on my training slide, the entire agency voted on some of those key behaviors we wanted. And so as a whole, our agency's values are advocate, respect, and communicate. But because each department, each program, each house has its own bubble, basically, now that we're using that term, but bubble, they needed to choose for themselves, and that creates the staff buy-in. And I know that if you join the cohort 2, you will learn much more about those matrices. Go ahead, Jim. And then there was a pandemic. So we, go ahead, Jen. We didn't quite know what to expect. And so in March of 2020, when COVID-19 happened, we paused, but we didn't stop. So from March till about July of 2020, there was not much happening for our PBS committee other than a conscious effort on my part as the leader of the group to continue to share resources and continue to boost morale of committee members. And then we were presented with an opportunity. So this is our special projects. Formerly, our human resource department led Shining Stars, which was a staff appreciation program done monthly. And they were interested in having more of a committee with, again, people from various departments in on that experience. So we were given the Shining Stars, which is, again, a special project. Very honest upfront, it does take about 5 to 6 hours a month for somebody to do this project. I'm fortunate enough to have Shelby Anderson from our HR department on the PBS committee, and she has been on it since the beginning. So she is very helpful for the Shining Stars. And then all the committee members read nominations that staff submit throughout the month. And we have a whole process for our Shining Stars. Our staff spotlights are where our ambassadors developed about 5 or 6 prompts to get to know staff in their departments. They want to know their why are they here, why are they still here, what brought them here, and then any sort of outside affiliations that you might not know about somebody. We have places that people volunteer, other places that people work, churches that people belong to, and then we create a poster. And it's a little bit more than a poster though, because what it is that it sparked a relationship between the person who had the conversation and the person being interviewed. But again, to be fully transparent, one of our biggest hurdles is making sure that everyone knows that PBS is more than staff appreciation. But that is a good place for it to start. Go ahead, Jen. Okay. So I know that there have been the DDA trainings, and if you join into the next cohort, you will have those as well. But what we were looking is for more of an agency-based training. So in summer of 2019, after the committee had been formed and we had attended day 1 and day 2, we did create an all-staff overview. We have a monthly leadership meeting, and so I was given the platform to talk about what PBS is and what the hopes were from the committee. We were also able to then vote on those sort of behavioral expectations. And again, like I said, they were advocate, respect, and communicate. And then the pandemic happened. But as the committee came back together in the fall of 2020, we realized that we really needed to get to leadership. And it's not to say that leadership had forgotten, but leadership had a pandemic on their hands. And so we did want to start again at the top to encourage a trickle-down effect of positive behavior supports. So the directors were given a retraining on what PBS is and how it could be helpful to their departments. And we just currently, like literally a week ago, did the frontline supervisor PBS training. And so this is for all of our house supervisors and program managers. So in our community living department, they had actually reached out after having the directors meeting and then kind of regrouping. Once now they have their bandwidth, a little bit more bandwidth, they were happy to include the PBS committee. Again, the trickle-down effect really is our stronghold. We didn't want this to be one more thing to add to somebody's plate, and it's not one more thing to add to somebody's plate during a pandemic. What we really were shooting to do is embed PBS philosophy and not do it for them. We want to shape but not steamroll, and so part of that starts at training, where we really open the dialogue as to what expectations do you have in this department, and what expectations can the people you support have of the staff that are working with them. And so we've been working closely with DDA and our support group within DDA to kind of look at what that would be for direct support professionals as well. Go ahead, Jen. Okay, so this is our next step, is to renew our pilot sites. 2 out of the 3 program sites we started have disbanded. So employment discovery disbanded because of changes in waivers, and then the summer camp program was put on hold. Again, worldwide pandemic, not much we can do about it. And again, with community living, with our house pilot site, they were in damage control due to the pandemic. So we are now hoping to renew that community living house. And now that we've trained the frontline supervisors, we want to get their input on if they are willing to be a pilot site, what that would look like for them. We also are hoping to develop behavioral expectations. Again, that's the matrices for each house. And then we want to get back to being able to assess progress. Go ahead, Jen. Okay, so there is a couple more passive ways that we use positive behavior support. So one of the first things we did, which was something I did in the schools, was develop a kudos board. And so ours says, I like the way you, and then advocate, respect, and communicate were the values that everybody voted on. And as you can see, there's some examples here of what people have done, how people are giving shout outs. And this is been moved. Our bulletin board is now back open now that our building is back open. So we have neutral dry erase markers that I wash every day, as well as I take pictures of this kudos board and I send them if they're mentioned once a month. I send them to the people that are mentioned and I CC their supervisors. So again, because not 100% of people are working in the building, this was stopped for a while, but now that we're back open, we are doing what we can and then sharing it virtually as well. We continue to do the staff spotlights. There is a section on our bulletin board for those, as well as our shining stars. That's the staff recognition each month. And then recently we developed a topic of the quarter for PBS. As more people are getting trained in what PBS is, we wanted to be able to give them a little more. So there's resources and examples on our bulletin board as well. So even those who haven't formally been trained yet are seeing this. And to be honest, there's people who write on this bulletin board that have never been through a PBS training. They just had a really good, say, new hire orientation, and they come down and they thank the HR team. Go ahead, Jen. I think this is my last one. Yes. So the other part, one of our goals this year, another goal was to create a shared library. And if you use Microsoft Teams, we were able to do this on that platform. So this is where we include resources. I, again, from my research, have research articles, but then there's also posts and memes and GIFs or GIFs, however you want to say it. And it's also sparked, again, not just research for me that I have to do as a behavior analyst, but research for others, because we've all survived the pandemic at this point. And so there are positive psychology organizations that have free resources. So I know a couple people have signed up for Action for Happiness. A couple people have Headspace. We're listening. We're always recommending podcasts. And we kind of use that Microsoft Team platform to share all of these things. And again, in the actual files, then we have icebreakers, team building activities, the Shining Stars information, the staff spotlight interviews, if anybody wants to do one, and just all of the PBS resources that we do get from DDA. So people don't have to wait to be formally invited, but that is available for them. All right, I think that's all, Jen.
Excellent, thank you, Lauren. And we're going to take questions towards the end.
Yep.
And Lauren is from the ARC of Northern Chesapeake region. There was a question in there as well. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel right now to give an overview of Minnesota, from a state that has been implementing a little bit longer than Maryland.
All right, thanks, Jen. I love that I'm following Lauren, because I had trouble thinking about how to tell stories when we have quite a few different stories that I could choose from. And I thought, well, let me hear what Lauren has to say, and I can try to build on it as you're thinking in your state how to move forward. In Minnesota, we started out with a really heavy emphasis on person-centered practices, because it's part of our Olmstead plan. It was written into all the action planning. And so as we got started, we were really looking at positive behavior support as that kind of framework and incorporating in other types of strategies. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the state of Minnesota decided first to kind of make a statement that we have, and we do have a rule within our state around positive supports. And it really just means any evidence-based practice that's driven by our person-centered values, right? So we emphasize our person-centered work. And I know that in Maryland, you've had a lot of different folks in your state going through and providing person-centered thinking training and other types of instruction. And those are really great values that help to drive positive support or positive behavior support. So positive supports are really meant to say, if you have person-centered values driving your evidence-based practices and you're using ways to assess how things are going, then that's considered a positive support, kind of like a generic kind of term. So if you see that word positive support, it's a little different from PBS. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that the other assumption is that we know as organizations that you are trying to juggle lots of different practices that are really important. And in Minnesota, we've got positive behavior support, but there's also applied behavior analysis. I know Jen mentioned DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. So we have folks that are organizations working in the mental health sort of areas. So you don't have to know all these terms, just know that our approach has been a little bit different from the Maryland kind of launch. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see is that we are kind of doing the same sort of mapping that you are. We've kind of approached it a little bit different in that we're looking at person-centered thinking training and person-centered planning methods. So those kind of strategies. At the same time, we're launching our positive behavior support efforts. And we've got 4 different areas where we've got regional teams that are moving forward. And I think you could hear from Lauren's story, we all kind of learn from each other, and we learn more from you as organizations than like Jen and I could ever teach you, because you all are the ones applying this information, and it's always different and exciting. So just know that as you hear these stories, you can think about the other types of practices that you're struggling to kind of integrate within your organizations. And like Jen said, work smarter, not harder. A lot of our folks are thinking about accreditation systems or strategic planning that's already in place. And instead of doing something completely separate and isolated, we're integrating our action planning so that we're actually meeting the needs of what you already need to do within your organizations. And if you go to the next slide, the thing that kind of links us together, yeah, that one. I was like, is that really the next slide? The thing that links Minnesota and Maryland together is that we do have a similar framework, and that is to form a team like Lauren talked about, make sure you have your stakeholders involved, reach out to them in the way that Lauren talked about in looking at having them directly involved in assessing what's going on in the organization that are your strengths, and then building on those strengths over time using an action plan kind of process. The other thing that you heard both from Jen and from Lauren is using your information, your data, like incident report data and staff attrition. Those things tell stories that help you understand whether you're getting things in place in a way that's making a difference, right? And so that's kind of what links Maryland and Minnesota together. And if you look at the next slide, we also use a similar kind of strategy where in your mind, think about a list of things that you need to do for PBS and, form a team, get a schedule set up, make sure you reach out to everybody, do that self-assessment, right? And that's what this graph really shows is one organization. And I popped this one in because in 2019, this organization lost almost all of their staff, right? They've been going through training, doing a really wonderful job. You see their data show that if you look at that list and look at what percentage of items that they're getting done on PBS was really increasing. But then in 2019, they lost all their staff. They didn't even have a team anymore, right? But they had their leadership. They had their core people like Lauren who kind of kept it going so that when they got over that sort of hump, you'll see is it 2020, right? That's when they just came back and they actually had continued making progress. They don't need us for the training because they already have a system operating and they have really smart people, and they've done a fantastic job. So you can see on the bottom axis, you just see team action planning. We have a section for person-centered strategies and PBS, and we also look at culture, and we look at data, and we think about how to integrate this into staff training. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I will keep us moving here to the next slide. But it gives you a sense of how Lauren's story kind of links. The other thing I think is nice is that this organizational path, this is a path process, and you'll see Trillium, that's one of our organizations. They wanted to do an action planning process with everybody, with the people they support, with family members, with community. So they decided to use their person-centered strategies, and instead of a path for one person, they did a path for their organization. And so this visual shows you how they came together as a large kind of community to talk about the dreams of what they want to accomplish. Actually, Lauren, I wrote down your mission statement because it was really awesome. And it kind of is that same spirit of how do we all treat each other with kindness and try to change those interactions that are causing challenges. So I just wanted you to see this because it's another example of clever people kind of applying what they're learning from the training that Maryland is providing in their own sort of way and doing it in an inclusive and person-centered sort of way. So you see they did it in 2016. So that's one little story. If you go to the next page, what I thought I would do is actually show you on our website where you can get a number of different stories. We have some organizations that have been implementing for 6+ years. We all got hammered by the pandemic as well. So we're all kind of, we limped through last year or this current year, and we're still making progress. So if you go to mnpsp.org, that just stands for Minnesota Positive Supports, right? That bigger picture. And you see this circled area that says training materials. If you go to the next page, so you've clicked on that, now you have some resources. So these are all free resources. That story that Jen showed you of empathy is actually in our positive social strategies box, which is over on the right-hand side. I'm going to direct you over to our home and community-based modules. If you go to this section, there are stories, but there's also modules that kind of take you through this process that Maryland is going through. So if you're not ready to commit yet, you kind of want to know more information, you can go over to the HCBS modules, and it's really mapped out in the way that Lauren kind of outlined, which is like form a team, get your group together, figure out how to communicate with your staff, think about how to integrate this into what you already do. So these modules can be really helpful. And if you go to the next slide, they're kind of mapped out in that same sort of format. And so, there's an overview, and then there's the section on building a team. There's a section on confirming how ready people are to kind of get started. And then it just kind of takes you through the process. You also see on this page on the right-hand side that if you scroll down, that's where you'll get to some of our stories. And so if you're on this page, just scroll down a little bit, and for Jen, just go to the next page. I decided to do screen captures because I wasn't confident what would happen if I tried to do my own thing. But here's some examples. These are all like PowerPoint slides, and they were done by the organizations as they went through the training. And so like for Lauren, as you all are doing your work and you're capturing these to tell, either boards or other folks that need to know what's going on, that's kind of what our teams did. They just captured what they were doing as they went through implementation and put it into, that was my cue that I'm running out of time. Sorry, this is Taj Mahal. But that just gives you a way to kind of look at some stories in more detail and see what it looks like from different perspectives. So you got public health, there's several different provider kind of examples, but you also have mental health and county sort of stories as well. The next slide is just really meant to say, feel free to, like, we all kind of steal each other's ideas and grab information. And I think that's the beauty of the PBS process, is you can learn from each other much better than you can kind of go online and go through things. So we've tried to use this as a network to connect you to things, and also to free resources. So that's one page that has you quick links. And then the next page is back to Jen.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm hoping what folks are hearing is real, that contextualized, that we talk about the PBS approach as a framework, and there are some core features, and Rachel's slide of the bar graphs showed some of those core features, but it's going to look different for everyone, and it's great that you have access to those examples, and we'll continue to build out those examples in Maryland. It's just so great that that Rachel from Minnesota has been supporting this, so we get access to broader stories as we're building throughout the state. I'm going to talk just briefly about how to get involved and then leave some time for questions. Feel free to post some questions in the question tab. There's also a chat tab. I've been putting some links in the chat tab. So if you're having trouble finding chat, scroll through. Sometimes it's hidden. You just find the word chat and hit the little triangle next to it, and the chat box will become larger. Okay, so let's talk about how to get involved. What does it mean to get involved? And I'll tell you a little bit about what DDA provides, and then what the organizations need to commit to that you want to think about. So overall, the DDA is providing those supports that I talked about. We'll provide training to the organization, leadership teams. There's access to consultation, whether it's from one of the partners or one of the regional PBS staff within the region, the DDA regional teams. There's also ongoing training opportunities for your cohort. So it's not a training event and then you're off to do this on your own. There's a connection to some support, and then also thinking about, let's start with tier 1, and then how do we move into tier 2 and tier 3. There's also support for evaluation, very similar to the tool that Rachel shared, to talk about those core features and figure out where you are with implementation, and help with action planning. The other aspect is, what do organizations need to do to commit to this? So there is some things that you need to think about when it comes to commitment to getting involved. It's thinking, do you have active leadership involvement and interest in this? Is this a priority for your organization? Can you convene a team that can coordinate these efforts? And like Lauren said, they came to the training with the team, and after the training and talking about leadership and what really made sense for long-term sustainability, started developing out what that team looked like a little bit differently. We will be sharing an application that folks will, organizations would complete in order to indicate interest. And if then the process would include the state PBS leadership here within DDA to review those applications and identify who is comprising that next cohort. And then once a team is identified for a cohort, there's a commitment to attending readiness webinars. Those are usually an hour and a half, and prior to the team training, so we can help you really get ready for that training. Attend 3 full days of team training. The mode to be determined at this time. We would love to do face-to-face, and hoping that we can. And then also agree to engage in technical assistance and evaluation, both virtual, on-site. And evaluation really means that we come out and support the process through meeting with you and doing a walkthrough to talk about those features of positive behavior support, to see where your strengths are, where you need to grow, and how we can help support that process. I will let you know that this is a long-term kind of commitment, if you will, that we know that in order to make changes within organizations that really last, it takes time. And so it is likely a few years of a process before you feel like you're really fully implementing positive behavior support across your organization. And that's for large organizations as well as small. And I think you heard that in Lauren's overview of kind of their journey, albeit a pandemic happened in the middle of their journey. And so hopefully you don't experience kind of the same event. Some thinking points when you think about this and take this back to your broader leadership. Determine your interest. Discuss with this broader leadership what you learned about positive behavior support. Review some of the resources. Identify the readiness information, and are you interested? Are your priorities around creating that positive, proactive program throughout your organization? Are you looking for strategies to help you with alignment of the great work that you're already doing? So this isn't one more thing, but works within what you're doing. And are you looking for strategies to support staff with implementation? A lot of what we talk about is how do you support staff with implementing the strategies that you're putting into place. I'll share some important dates and then open it up for some questions. Again, feel free to type in questions into chat into the question box, so we can start answering those in a minute or two. Some important dates to consider. We're going to follow up to this webinar on October 12th from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. So look for the announcement to come out. For those that have additional questions, want to learn a little bit more, are really thinking that they show interest in becoming part of cohort 2, we'll have an opportunity for another time to come together to share a little bit more details and around some specific questions that are coming up through this as well. We'll hold a webinar on November 4th to support the applications as you enter into wanting to apply. Applications will be due on December 10th to DDA, and teams will be notified by the 31st. If you're thinking about interest in this, know that then the next step is the readiness webinars and team training, the 3 days of team training. Those are to be determined at this point, because we need to understand the context of where or how those trainings will occur, face-to-face or virtual. We anticipate readiness webinars in February and training to occur between March and June of next year. Here's contact information. This is in your slides, and you can feel free to contact Dr. Meg DiPasquale or Terrence Proctor with any questions about this content. I shared some links to the Minnesota work in here, but we also have our International Association on Positive Behavior Support. I will put that link in the chat as well. There are some videos to introduce you to different aspects of positive behavior support, or different ways that schools or homes or communities have adopted the framework of positive behavior support. So there's that link for you. And then we also put in here the links, so you have these in a few places, for the informational modules and agency examples from Minnesota. So there are plenty of resources available right now, and then coming soon, Maryland DDA is putting together online modules around positive behavior support that are great for all staff, as well as teams that might be interested in positive behavior support. So kind of two avenues to that will be coming soon, and so those will be announced through DDA as well. All right. So I want to leave some time for questions. We have about 6 minutes, and I'm looking through some of the questions. If there are others, Meg or others who are looking at questions and have seen anything come up, let me know. All right. There's a question about a curriculum used to train staff on PBS, like we went through in 2013 with AIDD.
I can jump in, Jen, and respond. The AAIDD PBS curriculum is a really good example of, if you've invested in that and that you really like it, that is a really good universal curriculum for your staff. Some folks in some other states are using the tools of choice, which is another kind of curriculum for direct support staff. So I would encourage, there's some examples up on the mnpsp.org website of different types of universal strategies. They're not that many. I think the AAIDD curriculum is really good. So.
And I believe some of the cohort 1 organizations were trained in the PBS curriculum through AAIDD and found that it was really as they were embarking upon this work, there was that feeling of working smarter, not harder, because of access to those curricula, and it was already something that they had been working with their staff on. So it worked well together.
I would ask Lauren, because Lauren, would you say that, like, as your meeting process unfolded, you were looking at those kind of resources that you already had in place?
Yes, we didn't have any of those, and a lot of what we were finding in research obviously was from schools. And then we spent a lot of time, to be honest, as a committee, taking what was there, for children and adapting it for adult services. But I know that we did use the APBS links, but yeah, any of that other training would have been, before even our clinical director was here. So we did not have that to start from. But we were using the person-centered philosophy, and we use the one-page profiles here, and so we used what we had, but we did not have those that you had just mentioned.
There's a question about Maryland moving to the MANT system and how it's related to PBS. So I'll go ahead and answer that. We are using MANT for our behavior management, and the chapters 4, 5, and 6 that are optional, that we've been saying for the past few years have been optional. One of the chapters that they have is about positive behavior supports. Just like one of the chapters is also about trauma-informed care. So we felt that that chapter on positive behavior supports was very important, and an area that we thought would be more beneficial to have more of a deeper dive than just what MANT, that chapter in MANT does. So that is why we are doing the positive behavior supports. That's why we have, as at the end of the slides, Jen stated that coming soon we have these modules. We are working on a module system that will be able to be done online for your direct care staff to be able to go through and, at their leisure, go through and learn more about positive behavior supports in more detail, with a lot of like pop-outs and some really cool features that we're going to be putting onto the website. So it is still part of, it's blending what the principle from MANT, but just expanding that out. So I hope that answers your question.
Mike, I also see another question in here from Antoinette about smaller organizations and agencies that often team up together. So they're a smaller new agency, however, we team up often with other small providers. Can 2 agencies apply together in that situation?
That's a really awesome question. That's not something that we've thought about, but I'm not opposed to looking at how to, work with the smaller agencies to be able to to be able to build that capacity. So that's something that, we can talk further about. And, if that is something that we feel DDA and, Jen and Rachel, and we feel that is something that's doable, that we can make it happen, then when we do our follow-up webinar, we can definitely address that. And then also too, we will be typing in answers to these questions and sending them out. So we'll be able to answer that hopefully before the follow-up, but that's a great question. So it is 11 o'clock. I know that we want to keep everybody to the time frame. We respect everybody's busy schedules and appreciate that you were able to carve out this hour and a half with us to talk more about positive behavior supports, what we're doing. Cohort 2, we're very excited about moving forward with this. Know that DDA as a whole, this is an area that we feel very important. And it's work that we feel is really going to be helpful for the individuals we serve, as well as to support the staff that do all of this hard work. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to email me at meg.dpasquale@maryland.gov. I will respond back to you as soon as I can. And we will be more than happy. And if you want to have if you want to have a conversation a little more in depth, feel free to give me a call. I would use my cell phone number because we are still only working 1 or 2 days a week in the office. So if you leave me a voicemail, I may not get back to you as quickly on my office phone. So yes, again, please just thank you all for your time and attention and questions. And we really look forward to seeing some of your agencies at the next follow-up.
Okay, we're going to end the webinar. Thank you.